This is a Muscle Cat Media production.
And we welcome you back to Baseball Expats on a Tuesday. Look, I am a consumer of podcasts as much as I am a creator of podcasts, so I know that it can be frustrating when an episode doesn't drop the day you expect it to, but we had good reason. Eric is away. I don't know what he's doing. He sent us a video of him on a river with moose crossing or something. I don't know what's going on. He sent us like a video that was very Canada-y. And Spoon has been very under the weather. I thought maybe that we would get the Spoon version of the flu game yesterday, but Spoon was not up to flu game standards, so we delayed for a day. So instead of just my internal thoughts for 45 minutes on a Monday, we waited for Spoon to get better, and better he is. Spoon, how we feeling?
Yeah, on the up for sure. I think sadly it might have been the first episode I've missed all year, and we're like right at the end of the season, so it's not a good time to fall short like that. I'm a big consistency guy. This is a consistency pod, so apologies all. I'll be better next time.
I think the glue guy gets an off day once you clinch a playoff spot. I think if I'm managing, I'm fine with that. Your thoughts?
Yeah, like Matt Olson, like he plays 160 games, but like those 2 days off were well needed, right?
Yeah, and he'll be better because of it heading into the playoffs. And on that, probably a good time to let you know, a bit of a programming note. Once the playoffs do start, not sure when Eric's back exactly, but during the playoffs, we're going to aim to put out an episode Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays so you can keep up with everything happening during the playoffs, and potentially after the LCS games and World Series games do an episode as well. But we'll keep you updated on that as the playoffs progress. But one thing we do know is there will be plenty of content, plenty of talking points, and we'll be here to break it all down as we get closer to the playoffs, and plenty of storylines heading into the last week of the season, Spoon. But before we do that, this time last week, well, a little bit earlier than this time last week, we did what will definitely be our final Destiny draft of the season because we don't have any choice now. Mm-hmm. Maybe catch the listeners up on where we were heading into the week, what was at stake, and give us the final numbers. I actually don't know. I know that I was tracking pretty well, and Eric wasn't tracking very well middle of the week, but I haven't kept up with this as well as I should have, considering what was on the line. But maybe just update the viewers and listeners as to where we were heading in, and lay it on us. Give us the final results.
Yeah, so those who listened on Friday will know that Eric was a fair way off the pace. You and I were neck and neck. I think mid-episode, Rafi Devers had an RBI walk that put me on par with you, sort of with 2.5 or 3.5 days left to play.
Didn't Rafi then strike out as soon as we got off the air, and then you went
and then he got
further point back
and didn't even get his opportunities. We should have just stayed on a little bit longer and good things might have happened. But heading into week 5, all 3 outcomes were possible. We were all within 3 championship points of each other. We play for a 3-2-1 sort of point system per week. So all results were possible, but also some results needed other results to go people's way. For example, Rolsey to win needed me to come second so that Eric only got the 1 point. And I think it was the same in reverse. So I'll run through week 5's final score and break it down by player as well. And then I'll go to the overall leaderboard and we can crown an inaugural Destiny Draft season champion for 2025. So in third place for week 5 was Team Eric. He managed 10 from Cantillo, which seemed like a bit of a rogue pick. We're pretty thin as far as pitching depth with the packs, and that's just how Destiny Draft works sometimes. But he got 10 from Cantillo, who was his best player. He got 7 from Bryce Harper in a pretty solid effort. And James Wood gave our man Eric -6 points for the worst individual score by a position player or pitcher all season in Destiny Draft, which does go to show that if you say this guy strikes out a lot, you definitely shouldn't draft him in a format that punishes strikeouts. So James Wood, 11 Ks on the week, 3 hits, 1 run, 1 ribby, -6. That put Eric on 11 for the week, which was good enough for third. Not last, but third. That leaves me in second place for the week. So I got a couple of decent starts without being great from Andrew Abbott. He gave me 10 points. I had an okay week from Jackson Merrill. He gave me 8 points. Rafi Devers, man, his week was almost the exact same as James Wood in the end. He had a couple of games towards the end of the week where he struck out a ton, and he ended up scoring me -2, and that put me on 16 for the week. And that leaves you, my friend, as our week 5 champion. You managed 6 from Clay Holmes, who you were ready to take 0 from in a heartbeat. You weren't expecting any positive production. You just wanted to avoid negative production. You managed 4 points from Clay Holmes. You managed 4 points from PCA. And then our guy, Cal Marte, had a massive couple of days to finish the week. He got you 14 points. And just when I was looking at it before, it was these 2 games in a row he played. Must have been the Phillies series over the weekend, because he had I think he had one specific game where he got you 7 points or something like that. So he finished with 14. He was the best of anyone's player for the week. And you finished on 24 points to take out week 5. Which brings us to the season-long leaderboard. Myself, with 9 championship points and 104 points scored, will take out the bronze medal. Tied with 11 championship points was you and Eric, both on 11. Eric with 98 points and you with 113, which makes you, by tiebreaker, the Destiny Draft champion for 2025. Congratulations, brother.
I don't have a speech prepared. I wasn't expecting this. I don't know who to thank. It's funny because what was the final margin between you and me in the final week?
8 points.
So had Clay Holmes done nothing like I was hoping he had, I still would have, the outcome would have still been the same.
If he gave you 0 and Rafi Devers gave me 0, we would have tied.
So, really, the 2 people I should be thanking are Ketel Marte and Vladimir Guerrero Jr., because largely the rest of the year that I had was very average. Those 2 guys in the last 2 weeks that we did Destiny Draft decided to have incredible weeks. And ultimately those 2 guys were the reason why. Interestingly enough, I guess, yes, Vladdy was the number 1 overall pick 2 drafts ago, but I think Ketel Marte was my second pick. I believe I took PCA's first overall. So Ketel Marte, I think, was maybe even my 3rd pick. No, I would have taken 2 offensive guys. Clay Holmes definitely wouldn't have been second. So I think Ketel Marte was probably my number 2 guy and ended up being what got me over the hump.
Yeah, and interestingly, just looking at it, if I had snuck past you, I would have got 10 points. You would have got 10 points. And Eric would have won. So I couldn't have won without you coming 3rd. So once we kind of headed into that, and I probably didn't touch on it enough on Friday, but once we got into that point on Friday where Eric was flirting with single digits and you and I were approaching the 20s, I needed a lot more than to just get past you. I needed you to implode. And Clay Holmes probably was my ticket, and the ticket was confetti.
Well, that's an outstanding way to end things for me, especially coming from the clouds a bit. Funny that Eric basically led all season and then left his final Destiny draft, or he did, I guess, his worst for the final Destiny draft. So 5 total drafts is what it took, and you can see just how close everything was. As we've talked about, next year, I think we're going to look into how we do this, probably get some recommendations from some of the listeners, but I think we're going to add a 4th player in, which means we'll probably need a 3rd pack as well. We'll have to break down the 4th wall and show people how it's actually done, because in editing, the magic is where it all happens. It does take us a little bit longer than what you might think listening to the episodes, but we do have a lot of fun with it. Next year, we definitely want to get the listeners involved, so we may have a rotating tipster or a rotating picker that sort of comes on and represents the listener base as we play Destiny Draft, and try and formalize it to where we do it more regularly, whether it's every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, once a month, whatever that looks like. So I think we're on to something, Spoon. I had a lot of fun with it. Granted, this weekend for me was busy. I know you were under the weather and Eric was away, so that's probably why the banter wasn't as high as it could have been between the 3 of us. But nonetheless, I think it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it kept us, much like fantasy can in other sports, this is a fantasy sport. And I think it keeps you really interested in games that otherwise you'd have no reason to care about, right? Like for me to be locked in on an Andrew Abbott start against the Cardinals in late September says sort of plenty about what that game brought. And yeah, this week we were all sort of out of kilter a little bit, but the weeks 1 to 4, you could tell that we were all kind of box score checking each other's players. And I think that made for really good engagement, and bringing listeners into that next year will only have more upside for us, I think, as well.
Yeah, like for me to even be checking Clay Holmes' baseball reference page was something that wouldn't normally happen, right? So, yeah, definitely agree. It was a lot of fun, and like I said, as next season gets closer and closer, we will certainly have a look at how we get the listeners involved and how we expand on it next year, and continue to grow Destiny Draft to be the biggest fantasy phenomenon that the world has ever seen. Ultimately, that's what's going to happen. There's no stopping an immovable object or an unstoppable force. But yeah, looking forward to continue that next year, and I will be defending my title in 2026. So aside from all of that, there's obviously been a lot happening in the last week, and I mean even within the last couple of hours. Look, we could start in the National League. Of course, the Padres getting a walk-off in extra innings just like half an hour ago. Yeah. It clinches their playoff spot. It's still unknown whether or not they will be a wild card team, whether or not they will be an AL West team. We'll talk about that in a moment. But sort of want to start in the AL West, Spoon. Obviously, what we saw with Seattle sweeping Houston over the weekend, now up 3 games, and they own the season tiebreaker. So, I mean, in essence, they're up 4 games with, 6 to play. So it likely forces Houston into the wild card scramble. The problem with that is Houston's not guaranteed a wild card spot. So they're in this really weird position. And actually, in just looking at it, I don't think it's any different now. As we enter Tuesday's games in North America, there's only one American League team that has clinched a playoff spot, and that's the Toronto Blue Jays. So it's absurd what's happening in the AL now. But from what you were able to observe over the weekend from that series, I mean, we highlighted it as being potentially one of the best. The first 2 games of that series were actually really close. There's some big storylines to come out of it. But what were your observations from the Mariners sweeping Houston? It's something you called. You said if there was one team that you could be with right now heading into a wild card series, you said it was the Mariners. And boy, oh boy, did they deliver over the weekend.
Yeah, and I need to go logging through accounts and find my digital ticket, so to speak, for my Mariners bet, because right after the trade deadline, I got on them for the World Series at 23s. I just had a look before. They're into 650 third favorite, which is crazy. Like, I know I've sort of talked about all year, I love a long lineup, and they are just a long lineup. The rotation's there, the bullpen's there. They have all 3 phases of baseball like on lock, and they got a chance to show that in the sort of most important games they've played so far. They look like a team I don't want to run into, and they backed it up again on the weekend against their divisional rivals, a divisional team that sort of had the wood on them for a very long time. And the AL West has ran through Houston for like a decade, right? And to go out there and to hit a few solo homers off my guy Hunter Brown and then just lock that game down at the back end with their bullpen, which they've done all year. I understand why they're 650. I'm almost sad that the market sort of cottoned on, because I'd be going again if they were at double digits. Now I kind of feel like 650 is a little too short to reinvest there, but they're getting the respect they deserve, man, because they are genuinely a proper World Series competitor.
Obviously, the big dumper passing Ken Griffey Jr. as the franchise record holder in home runs, which I don't think anybody had on their 2025 bingo card. I think what's impressed me the most about Cal Raleigh is that he's just like, dude, I don't belong in any of these conversations. And if you had asked even, maybe an above average baseball fan 6 months ago who Cal Raleigh was, I don't know that they would have been able to tell you. And I'm struggling to remember a guy, particularly on the home run side. I don't think we've ever seen this, where it's a guy that sort of starts to etch his name into history a year after being a relative unknown. Now, if Cal Raleigh had been the catcher of the Yankees, we probably know who he is. He's been stuck up there in Seattle. He's still a relatively young guy. But the power surge has, and it's not that it's come from out of nowhere. He's always kind of shown this, but I'm struggling to remember a guy launching himself into the stratosphere in terms of the company that we're starting to mention him in, with guys like Griffey and Mickey Mantle and those sorts of names, the more home runs that he starts to hit. I can't think of anybody.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting as well, and it's part of what I like about this Mariners team, they don't need it, like, if you're talking about the Yankees, it's Aaron Judge and the Yankees, right? Like if you're talking about the Dodgers, even it's Ohtani and the Dodgers. It's not really Cal Raleigh and the Mariners, even though it is. It's a team of, like, Cal Raleigh is having an unbelievable season, right? He's breaking all sorts of records. He's hit 58 home runs. He's got 6.9 WAR. J-Rod has 6.5 WAR. They've got like multiple starters that are just like good enough to be getting Cy Young votes every single year, and they've probably got the best back end bullpen of anyone. I like how spread out they are as far as their sort of superpower, and it does help that it's not a massive name like you said, but it's not just like Raleigh carrying a bunch of these guys, even though it could be that. But they're not leaning on his 58 home runs. And if you look at a lot of the times he hits those 58 home runs, they're already up like 6 or 7-0 in the game as it is.
Before we move on to the Astros, just one last thing on the Mariners. Does it help you cheer for them or hurt you in terms of cheering for them when you see how well the former Diamondbacks guys are performing for that team?
Oh, no, I love it, man. I don't sort of begrudge, anything like that. I mean, watching how much it meant to both guys. Obviously, we're talking about Josh Naylor and Gino. They wanted to stay. They tried as hard as they possibly could. They played hard down the stretch, heading into the deadline to be able to stay and keep the vibes going. Ultimately, we got a few prospects back and restocked the pitching farm, which was much needed. If they get to go and win it, that's awesome. And honestly, if they go and win a World Series, that probably does help the chances of them coming back and signing in free agency anyway, right? Like for some guys, it's all about winning a ring. If they win a ring this year, then maybe go back to the team where they had a lot of fun before they were traded. But yeah, I've been a semi sort of Mariners fan since the trade deadline anyway, definitely from a punting perspective at 23s too. So I'm happy to sort of see it all coming together. I just hope it doesn't collapse in typical Seattle heartbreak, which has been known to happen at the pointy end of the season, sort of historically for the franchise, right?
Yeah, you just have to think being essentially 4 games up, 3 games with the tiebreak, is 6 to play. I know what you're saying, and I know a few people from that part of the world too, but you just have to think that the Mariners have clinched that division. Before we will talk a little bit about the Diamondbacks, because that trade that you talked about, or the trades that the moves that they made at the deadline, could work out for both teams, because the Diamondbacks are still very much in the thick of things heading into the final week. But I'm curious as to what you think where this leaves Houston. So they enter the final week tied by record with Cleveland, and I believe also lose that tiebreak because the Guardians bettered them in a 3-game series earlier in the year. So they've got to finish at least a game better than Cleveland, and they've got 6 games on the road, not against difficult opponents, but against divisional opponents. They're playing at the A's and at the Angels. This seems like a very difficult road for Houston to get into the playoffs in what, from basically the midpoint of the season, seemed like it was going to be a foregone conclusion. It's not really the collapse that we've seen from the Mets on the National League side, but it's not going to be an easy road. I mean, you have to think that, especially with the way that Cleveland is playing, that Houston are going into the week, thinking they've maybe got to win 5 of 6 just to get into the playoffs?
Yeah, honestly, I think they're cooked. And I think we kind of touched on it almost immediately. When Josh Hader went down, it felt like this was just going to have a massive domino effect, right? And it has. The rejigging they had to do at the back of the bullpen then led to some issues at the sort of front end of their rotation. I think there's clearly some culture stuff there, right? Like that Framber Valdez incident was probably one of the most bizarre things I've seen ever in baseball. He's a free agent this year. All the sort of messaging coming out is that Houston don't want to bring him back. It feels like the vibes of that dugout have sort of been held together by sticky tape for a while, and they thought that bringing Carlos Correa back might be able to, add a little bit of super glue there. It doesn't feel like it's happened because they just don't look like they're passing the eye test for a team playing together. And I know that's not exactly the most sort of quantifiable, I don't know if that's an X vibes kind of stat metric or what it is, but it's just hard to be excited about a team that maybe limps in, maybe doesn't, but is this how you want to be playing baseball heading into the last week of the season? I mean, Baseball Reference has them as a 57% chance to make the postseason. I don't know. I can't see it.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I mean, look, there's a potential that if they do sneak in, they become a slightly more dangerous team. Like, I think there's some whispers potentially that Yordan Alvarez could be back for the postseason. Also potential that Josh Hader could be back for the postseason. Neither of those two things are confirmed, but they're definitely a better team if they sneak back in and get those 2 guys back. But they've left it so late, dude.
Yeah, they are also one of those teams, and much for the same reason I love the Mariners. They are one of those teams that if you shorten a playoff series down to 3 starting pitchers, yes, please. Like, give me Framber Valdez and give me Hunter Brown as, like, we can win 2 games before we even go to a game 3 of a best of 3. Like, in a wild card series, if you've got Framber into Hunter Brown at the 1-2, I think that really plays to their strengths. They're losing games every sort of 3rd, 4th, and 5th day because of the rest of the rotation. So sneaking in, I can see how you could like it based on who's going to take the ball in the key moments. I still just think there's a bit missing. And Yordan Alvarez had a 200 OPS plus after coming back from the IL, and he slips and slides on home plate in the first inning last week. And it just, when it rains, it pours in baseball, right? And it just seems like all the bad things that could happen have happened. And to be fair, to Houston's credit, we kind of all had basically written them off at the start of the year, and especially a month or 2 in, we said, wow, hell of a dynasty, but it's come to an end. If this is how it ends, if they miss the playoffs by 1 game because their best player fell over and, their reliever's been injured, and like a lot of things have had to go wrong just for them to get this close to missing out, it would be unfair to sort of knock the franchise for what they've built over the last decade.
And a division that we haven't talked a lot about really this entire year, because I think at one point the Tigers were 16 games clear of everybody else in the AL Central. And now they find themselves a game up on the Guardians, 2 teams that have gone the complete opposite directions in the last 10 days. Like, this would be an all-time comeback. Not only if the Guardians are able to make the playoffs, but if they're able to win the division. So they are tied with Houston, but they do have the tie break. So in essence, they're a game up in Houston for the wild card. But all of a sudden, they're a game back of the Tigers in the AL Central. Tigers have dropped 9 of their last 10. Guardians have won 9 of their last 10. Unsure who has the tie break in that scenario. But, like, where on earth has that come from? Like, I think we buried the AL Central 2 months ago because the Tigers were just destroying everyone. I mean, like I said, at one point, I think up to 6 weeks ago, they had a 16-game lead in that division, and it's whittled down to 1 the last week of the season.
I genuinely can't remember seeing anything like it. And you're right, we haven't talked about it for a while because it didn't feel like there was anything to talk about. And honestly,
it felt like they were slipping, but it felt like they were going to limp home. And then, like, with Screwball in the playoffs, like you said, shorten it to a 3-game series. Even if they do get into that, you feel like they're going to win game 1, and things may happen. But, it wasn't necessarily going to be a World Series type of year necessarily for the Tigers this year. Feel like they've overachieved, but now all of a sudden it could be a disastrous season, right? Yeah,
and look, more so, not even just, I was less worried about what the Tigers were doing. It just felt that 16 wins in front was too big a mountain to climb for a team that their all-star closer, their superstar closer, has been suspended for 2 months, being investigated for gambling, right? Like, what it felt like that was going to do to Cleveland. And I think that the week that happened, the bullpen came out and blew like 3 saves in the space of a week. Like, it just felt like everyone else was dead. The Twins were 3rd place in the division at the time, and they sold 40% of their roster so that they could cut payroll. Like, it didn't feel like anyone else wanted to even try to win the Central. So all the Tigers had to do was turn up in their uniform every day and make sure the cap was facing the front instead of facing the back, and they were going to win the division. But evidently they haven't even really been able to do that. And looking at it now, the Guardians are $2.10 to win the division. I would be surprised if there had been a bigger, whether you look at Fangraph percentages or whatever, if there had been a bigger division choke, so to speak, than what we might be seeing if the Guardians take this series.
So if we look at where the American League sits now, I'm going to put you on the spot. Toronto is clinched. I think we both agree that the Mariners are going to win the West. Who do you think wins the Central? And who do you think claims those 3 wildcard spots? Right now, the Yankees look relatively cleared, 88 and 68. They're 4 games up. Essentially, they've got to win 2 games, and they're in. It's basically between the Red Sox, Guardians, and Astros as to who wins those second 2 spots. But again, those could also be determined on who you think wins the AL Central. So gut feel right now, who's your winner of the Central? And who takes probably those second 2 wildcard spots behind the Yankees?
Gut feel is Tigers are going to take it because they're going to get 2 starts from Scooble. So he goes tomorrow, so he'll go 1 more time. With their what have they got, 6 games left? Yeah, 6 games left. 2 starts from Scooble's obviously massive there. I think they'll win the division by a game, but the Guardians will be close enough that will be better than what the Astros have done, because looking at it right now, the Guardians must have the tiebreaker over the Astros because they've got them on the outside looking in. And I think what's Boston's run home? Man, Blue Jays and Tigers, wow. So the last 3 days of the season is Red Sox Tigers. That could be just playing for a wild card spot, right? My gut feel is what I said just before, is that the Astros are cooked, so I'm going to stick with that. So I'm going to give those last 2 spots to Boston and the Guardians, and the division to Tigers. But I think even as of tomorrow, I might be changing my vote on all 3, depending on how that result goes with Scooble starting in Cleveland.
Scooble starting in a must-win game tomorrow against Cleveland. That feels to me like maybe a little bit of a tickle as to something that you'll give us later on in the show. I'm not putting that on you, but I know you. And I feel like it's not the last time we're going to hear Tark Scooble's name in this podcast. All right, look, let's move on to the National League, which is a little bit more settled in some ways, but not in others. The Cubs I guess let's start with the division winners. The Brewers have clinched that division. The Phillies have clinched theirs. The Dodgers have clinched a playoff spot. Both they and San Diego have each done that, but the division out in the West has not been clinched yet, but the Dodgers do have a 2.5-game lead with 6 to play. But all of the interest right now in the National League is on the wild card, except for out West, like I said, where the Padres are still an outside chance to potentially win the division. Whether or not that matters, I mean, it does matter for seeding, but it's not necessarily the reason why people are watching National League baseball, I think, in the last couple days of the season. So where we sit going into Tuesday in North America, the Reds and Mets are tied for the final wild card spot and basically the final playoff spot in the National League. The Reds have the tiebreak over the Mets. Your Arizona Diamondbacks, who somehow still have their most important week of the season ahead of them, I don't know how this keeps happening, are somehow, some way, 2 games above 500 and a game back. The Giants lost to the Cardinals today. Those 2 teams, 3.5 games back. I don't think either of us think the Cardinals or Giants are going to sneak their way in. No. The Cardinals won that game.
Oh, Cardinals. Sorry. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Cardinals won a 6-5 final in San Francisco, which I think probably dashed San Francisco's hopes. Again, look, the Cardinals have done this before. I think in 2013, whenever they won the World Series, they came back from something ridiculous and had to win the one-off wild card game. The Pete Kozma game against Atlanta, where the infield fly wasn't called or was called when he was in like medium depth left field. Yeah. That was the year that the Cardinals won an absurd amount and made the playoffs and shouldn't have, and ended up, I think, going to the World Series. Or maybe it was 2011. I can't remember. Look, it doesn't matter. I don't think either of us think the Giants or the Cardinals are going to get to the playoffs. It would certainly be a big story if they did, but they have a lot of work to make up. So the Mets are hitting the road at the Cubs and at the Marlins. The Marlins, I think, also mathematically are still alive. They're 4 games out, which is also crazy, 4 games below 500. So, I mean, look, the Marlins are still playing pretty good baseball. So those aren't easy games for the Mets. Potentially the Cubs don't have anything to play for. The Reds close against 2 divisional opponents, the Pirates and the Brewers. Brewers might be resting players, maybe not. And the Diamondbacks, what is their run home?
It's brutal. It's Dodgers into Padres. Ohtani on the mound tomorrow.
Yeah, 2 teams that are still in a division race. So, look, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just by the tone you just gave me, it sounds like you think it's a race between the Mets and the Reds. But look, the D-backs being just a game back, you have to give them some sort of a hope. So, what's your feel, sort of, with those 3 teams heading into the final 6 days of the season?
The feel is for the D-backs. If they win the start tomorrow, Ohtani versus Fart, which is a massive mismatch, obviously, I feel a lot better about all of it, right? I think there's a world where the Padres lose a couple of games in the next 2 days. They lose the division. The Dodgers win the division. And by the time we're playing them in the last 3 days, they might be resting a player or 2 or resetting their rotation. I'm much less worried about the last 3 games against San Diego as I just am about us getting to those games and still being in the hunt, so to speak. What I'm actually much more worried about is the Reds having Pittsburgh and then a Brewers team that's probably starting to think about the postseason already. It's very, what's that? 6 of the last 7 for the Reds. They've just kind of come out of nowhere. And I mean, a 4-game sweep over the Cubs probably wasn't on the cards for anyone. And some of those were 1-0 games, quite close. And we don't have the tiebreaker over the Reds. So my gut is the Reds are going to be the ones who sneak in. for the same reason, I'm knocking the Astros because they're just trying to limp to the line. Seems like the Mets are doing pretty similar. I think it's going to be Cincinnati. And look, I'm pretty excited about what the Reds could do in a postseason spot. And Eric and I think, talked about it like 3 months ago. They were a great value bet at like 8 to make the postseason. Now that all their starters are up and running, I mean, what Hunter Brown did last week with a complete game shutout, 1 hit, 9 strikeouts, or something like that. You know how good Abbott is. Like, it's a rotation that, again, really fits the best of 3 model, the 3-game wild card, whatever it is. And they do have a lineup that, you remember last year, it was always Dela Cruz and the Reds. It's not that at all. I think he's down to like 7th in the batting lineup now. It's a genuine like 1 to 9 guys who all contribute. You got TJ Friedel at the top. Then you got power bats like Spencer Steer, Tyler Stevenson. It's a fun team. It's a fun ballpark to watch baseball in. So I think I'm leaning towards the Reds. What I did want to touch on, I think it's really interesting, and you can see it in both the NL and the AL. I can't remember, maybe you can. I can't remember any team, let alone as many teams as this, being sellers at the deadline and still being in the race. Like the D-backs were heading in with a week to go and they're a game out of the wild cards. They gave away their 2 best bats 2 months ago. The Red Sox are right there. They gave away Devers. Maybe the craziest of all of it is no one thought the Guardians were going to be in, and now Shane Bieber's going to maybe start for the Blue Jays in the playoffs. Like, what has happened where sellers are competitors? Like I know the expanded playoffs kind of fits to that model a little bit, where you've got teams that are they're on the brink. They don't know if they should buy or sell. But it's funny that if half the teams we're looking at right now, we're like, if only they had an extra piece or two. And it's like, well, they had those pieces. Like the D-backs had those pieces. And who knows, those 11th inning games that the D-backs lost over the last week or two, where they just needed someone to be able to hit the ball into the outfield. And Josh Naylor and Gino Suarez are now doing that for the Mariners. I mean, hindsight, right? But what could have been?
Well, I think it's just, and I've just looked this up while you were talking about it because it is interesting, but I think it's just a case of extreme parity this year. Because if you look at in both leagues last year, the last team in both leagues, well, similar records. So the last team in last year in the American League was the Tigers, and they were 10 games above 500. There is a legitimate chance that the last team in the American League this year could do so, being, I guess, somewhat similar, probably maybe a little bit less. But the difference is that the Rangers and Royals that are 5 and 6 games back are probably not as close as what we saw last year. But then you go and look at like the National League from last year. Like the Mets were the last team in. They had the tiebreaker over your Arizona Diamondbacks. They were 89 and 73. You're not going to be a seller at the deadline and be 89 and 73. This year, 500 potentially gets you into a playoff spot in the National League. So expanding it to that, maybe not so much in the American League this year, because those teams are a little bit better, albeit those records have fallen back. We talk about like with Detroit, it was 16 games up 6 weeks ago. But I think just the parity that what we're seeing, particularly in the National League, and maybe, I mean, I'm calling it parity. Maybe some will just say average baseball teams. You can look at it any way that you want to. But by virtue of having that, what I will continue to call parity, we're seeing some of those teams that, quote unquote, gave up in July still being there fighting for a spot. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I don't think that Major League Baseball envisioned that a team at or around 500 in this new format would be getting to the playoffs, but here we are.
Is that a knock on it? Because I mean, I'm all for expanded playoffs, especially as as a D-backs fan who is never going to win the NOS because the Dodgers spend $1 billion on their team every year. The only way you're going to get in is a wild card spot. For a long time, that was one game, and it was a best of one, and so much had to go right. I'm for expanded playoffs, and I think they are here to stay regardless because of all the extra revenue they generate. But it does feel like a little bit of a knock on the system when it's just like, well, someone has to get in, right? And that's what this year's NL wildcard feels like. Well, someone has to get in, and that's largely because the Mets fell away, I guess. But it feels a bit probably not what they had in mind when a team can be like, yeah, look, we're retooling to the future. We're just going to go out there and let the kids play. We're going to play 500 baseball the rest of the year, and now we're still there with a sniff.
I also wonder if the random nature of the schedule has something to do with it. Like, if you're in the spot, say that, I mean, we'll use the D-backs as an example because they had basically given up on their season and now they're a game back. with 6 games to play, they probably felt a certain way, but the way that you now have to look forward to the last 3 months of the season is not the way you used to look forward to the last 3 months of the season, right? Because you could have gone the Dodgers, the Giants, the Padres. We feel like they're all better than us. We're going to play them a million times in the last 3 months. Let's be sellers. Whereas now it's like, well, actually, you know what? We had series at home against 2 bad AL West teams, and we were playing the worst team in the NL Central. And, oh, yeah, I forgot about that trip that we had to go to Chicago to play the White Sox. And not saying at all that front offices aren't taking that into account, but it does randomize things a little bit more, right? Where maybe you feel like it's so hard to know, was my schedule front loaded or was it back loaded, because things haven't really been holistic yet. So in some ways, I guess maybe it's also a product of this new balanced schedule of knowing, well, have we played the hardest part of our schedule, or will the next 3 months be incredibly easy based on how the final standings shake out? Hindsight's 2020 with that, but maybe it's a byproduct of the new scheduling system as well, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny when people look at like strength of schedule in like May, and it's like, yeah, well, we played the hardest teams. It's like, well, yeah, but they might have just played the bad teams, and like their early season dominance doesn't really mean anything. It's not until we are where we are now that you can actually have a look at it, and to that point, it's quite difficult to be making decisions about buy or sell at trade deadlines when you don't even know yet, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the way that you would have judged the Dodgers at the beginning of the season, if they don't end up winning the division and are a wild card team, is going to be a much different way than you would judge the Dodgers late in the season. One thing that I'm still struggling with this, and I know it's a product of the scheduling system, what we've been talking about. Rob Manfred has mentioned when realignment comes, maybe that'll change, blah, 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 blah. We've talked about it 100 times. I don't want to talk about the balanced schedule. I hate it, whatever. I am not sure that I like the tiebreaker thing. Game 163 was awesome, and we've gotten rid of that. I get why we've done it, because putting a team in that situation, I mean, you play 162 games, you should be able to win a tiebreak, but I almost just feel like you've played 162. What's one more when you've gone that far? Why does some series that I played against a non-divisional opponent in May matter as to whether or not I get into the playoffs? I don't think that's very baseball. I get why they've done it, because it creates the scheduling. It's better for the broadcasters. TV knows when they're going to get games. You don't have to have this thing where, a team's sitting on a tarmac wondering what city they're going to after game 162. I get all that. But as a fan, I kind of miss the prospect of having like a Monday afternoon game 163.
And you know what would be even better? Just make it that game is played, they're going to be the road team in wherever they're heading next. Play it at the neutral venue. Like if the Padres it wouldn't be it'd be like the Brewers or whoever, they're going to play whoever sneaks in. Like just play that game 163 is played between 2 neutral teams in Milwaukee, and then they're already there to start their playoff series the next day. Like that would be unreal to watch 2 teams play at a neutral venue like that, see what kind of crowd representation you get. Because as much as it was anxiety ridiculously fueled and Archie Bradley hits a triple in, chaos, like proper wild card games when they were best of 1. I'm glad it's gone to best of 3. Leaving the door open for a 163 game though is fun. And I'm with you like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with kind of having that, because the different scenarios with tiebreakers isn't fun. And what it ended up leading to was some rubbish last year where I think the D-backs ended up missing out because the Braves and the Mets both needed to win 1 game in a doubleheader because they both had the tiebreaker over Arizona. So the Mets won game 1 of the doubleheader, and then they just benched all their starters and played like a bunch of AAA guys in the second. So the Braves won game 2 of the doubleheader. Like, how is that a better system than having 2 teams continue to play competitive baseball in a game 163? I don't understand.
Well, and I mean, it's a good point, because in that scenario last year, you've got 3 teams that are tied. So what do you do? Does somebody have to play a game 164 potentially based on what the tiebreak looks like? Look, I understand why they've done it, but game 163 for mine was incredible because it would capture a nation, right? It's after 162 games, you still aren't able to split these 2 teams. And maybe the other argument is divisionally, and maybe not even so much as more. See, now I'm trying to help you out, Rob. I'm trying to help you out, and I can't even come up with a good argument for it, because in the old system, I would even be able to live with a divisional tiebreaker existing because you played each other so damn much, right? But now you don't even play each other that much. So I still don't even feel like it's fair from a divisional standpoint. This is not a soapbox that I intended to get on, Spoon, but here we are.
I think as well, like, why shouldn't the team who did make a playoff spot be rewarded by the teams trying to scrape in, having to, you know, I'm sorry, but you've got to burn your ace now in a game 163. So now your SP2 goes up against our ace in the start of the best of three. It benefit. There's a lot of, you know, complaining about teams that make the playoffs, that it's too sort of level playing field. This reduces that. If you're not good enough to get it done cleanly over 162, which is exactly what's happening this year with the Mets, then go out and burn your ace in a game 163, and the advantage then carries over to the team who kind of earned their spot fair and square.
Yeah, and look, I think all this will sort itself out in the next, maybe not the next year or two, but over the next half decade to decade, once we start to understand what the new landscape is going to look like from a CBA standpoint, from an expansion standpoint, what then the alignment is, how the scheduling is sorted out. We're probably not going to have 162 games, so if it's 130, 140 game schedule, is that more conducive to having a game 141 as opposed to a game 163? So, look, I know that MLB, what they've done is experimental and looking ahead to the future of what the alignment of baseball looks like. But look, we wouldn't have a podcast if we didn't have opinions. So it's just one man's way of viewing the world.
And I'll always try to shoehorn in mutual baseball being played at neutral venues. Like when you had a time zone issue, I'm like, play every game at Coors. When you've got a game 163 issue, I'm like, play every game in Milwaukee. Like any issue you've got, you come to me and I'll tell you how we can reframe it into neutral baseball.
But Spoon's always half full with you. That's why we get along. Look, I want to give you your flowers for one of your preseason picks, and we'll get into some tips that you've got for the big week ahead. But one thing I just wanted to touch on, which I've been seeing a lot of, and it has hit a nerve with me. I'm a little bit older than you, Spoon, but not much. And it's Clayton Kershaw walking off at Dodger Stadium, his final time in the regular season. Surely we'll see him in the postseason again at Dodger Stadium. Again, I don't know what that's going to look like, but just seeing the list of aces and top players that have retired in the last 4, 5, 6 years. And you could argue that Verlander is probably still part of this club, but it does really feel like the sundown on the stars, the Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famers, some of them current Hall of Famers of my childhood is really coming to an end. It really does feel like a generational shift that a lot of these guys that for whatever reason were part of this sort of same conversation because they played so many wild card games together, because they all played in so many different epic postseason series against each other. It really does. And oftentimes you don't get this because it's just constantly a revolving door of stars. But with Kershaw going off and me just seeing a lot of this on social media and reading a bit about it, it does really feel like it's kind of the end of one generation and the other generation is in its peak. Oftentimes we don't get that in sports. So it does feel kind of unique, but it's making me sad at the same time.
The only thing I can think of that it's very similar to is what's happened in tennis, right? Like for a long time, it was like, all right, here's Federer, here's Nadal, here's Djokovic, and pretty much every Grand Slam is going to be won by one of those three guys for like 15 years. And then it just kind of like all of a sudden it's like Federer can't make it out to Australia anymore. Yeah, like that was a bit like, Clayton Kershaw was going to have to miss a start because he's feeling old and tired. It's like, wait, what? Like these guys aren't just going to do it forever. They've been doing it forever my whole life. Like, what do you mean they're human? That's the only thing I can kind of think of where it's similar, where, it isn't one guy, it's a group of guys, right? Like there's no sport where it's a group of guys, or it's not like Brady had like 4 or 5 quarterbacks that were sometimes beating him. Like he was just beating everyone. So the tennis comparison is probably the best one I can draw. I guess it started with Greinke retiring a couple of years ago, right? Because he's in that group. You've still got Scherzer there too. Like these are guys that are between 75 and 85 career WAR that are all going to be Hall of Famers. And it's hard to see right now. I know we're talking about the next gen being in their prime, but like who are the guys that are going to go in and be that? Because it feels like we're looking at a lot of really exciting young guys right now. But who is the next? Like, is it someone like Zach Wheeler? I don't think so. He's got He's got 40 WAR at age 35. Like, who is the next that's going to be talking 75, 80, 85 career WAR for a starting pitcher? Especially given they're teaching him to throw 102 out of college, and it's like a prerequisite to have had your first Tommy John surgery before you play for high school ball. Like, are we ever going to see it? I don't know.
Yeah, and look, like I said, Verlander and Scherzer, who are still playing and will, but by all accounts, continue to play after this year. But even they're not their old selves, you know what I mean? So it really does just feel, and maybe that's, look, the tennis analogy is incredible. I hadn't even thought about that, but you're right. I mean, that almost felt a little bit more abrupt because it was so much more evident. Like, me and a buddy have talked about this. Like, the difference between 1 and 5 in tennis is like the difference between 1 and 65 in college football. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like if there's a giant gulf after you get.
How many Grand Slams does Andy Murray win if he's born in a different era? Right? Like,
yeah. Exactly right. So, but it's just funny because baseball does allow for all of these superstars to coexist at the same time, but the game has just shifted since so many of these, to your point, high WAR guys have come in. And not that it's the NFL model where we're going to bring in all these ancillary guys. They're going to be really good for 4 or 5 years, and then we're just going to draft high school guys or college guys. They're going to come through and do it again. I don't think that's the model that we're getting to, but the game has just changed so much to where, when's the next 600 home run guy that we're going to see? So I had the same feeling whenever Albert Pujols retired a couple years ago. It's like, when's the next guy of that ilk that we're going to see? And are we going to see it? And just with Kershaw retiring, I guess maybe it just brought up some of those things to go, is this a true end of that one-of-a-kind type of player that we saw in that sort of early to mid 2000s through to about 2020? Like, is that era coming to an end? And it really does feel like it is.
Yeah, and I think maybe you almost could be guilty for taking it for granted because there were 5 guys doing it. You didn't realize how special it was, but we could now go through decades without seeing it. So top 5 active WAR leaders for pitchers. Verlander, 42 years old, has 82.5. Kershaw, 77.7. Scherzer, 74.9. Massive drop-off. Chris Sale, 57.4. And Jacob deGrom, 45. That's your top 5 active WAR leaders right now. So in 6th place is Garrett Cole at 34. He's half of Verlander's career WAR. The youngest guy, the highest guy under the age of 30 is Zach Gallen with 21 career WAR. We're never going to see it again. I think I can almost put that on record. We're not going to see a 70 WAR starting pitcher anymore. Maybe Paul Skeens. I don't know. Logan Webb's here at 21. He's 28 years old. I don't know, man. I think the game has changed in a lot of different ways. I don't know where Skeens would be at after his. Yeah, okay, so he's 71st. He's on 13 WAR at the age of 23. So what if he has 10 6 WAR seasons? He's definitely in the conversation, right? So he is the guy that could be knocking on that door because, I mean, this list is just old dudes, the whole way up and down. Jose Quintana, 11th in active WAR right now. He's 36 years old with 33. Aroldis Chapman, Kenley Jansen, and Craig Kimbrell are all top 20. It's crazy, man.
Apologies to all of those in your 30s listening to this that now feel like you're in your 60s. That was not my intention.
It's different to real world old.
Yeah, look, I was sad about it, so I wanted everybody else to be sad about it. That's welcome to my wife's world, right? Speaking of young star pitchers, before we get to your tips for the week, I think it's due that we give you your flowers for one of your preseason picks that came good over the weekend, and that was your tip that you gave us way back in spring training, and you gave us a lot of reasons why you thought it was one of the best preseason props of the year. And it never really looked in doubt. And that was 200 or more strikeouts. Hunter Brown gets it in his second last start. Cue the cheering music for Spoon. Look, it's probably the only really long-term play that you're going to get up from a player performance standpoint, but those aren't easy to get up. And it just always sort of looked like throughout the year that he was traveling to get it, particularly about the midway point of the year. It looked like if he kept on the pace that he would get it, but gets it a game before probably his final start, and Spooner cashes in.
Yeah, so he paid, it was 5-1. I think I had 4 players at the start of the year. So if you staked them all evenly, you would have picked up a unit. It's not an amazing return when you leave it sort of there all year, but it is a nice little pick me up at 5-1 to put a chunk on at the start of the year and end up coming away with that result. I was, like you said, it was ticking along well all year. He had 179 last year, 178 the year before, and all signs were pointing to him pitching more innings this year, which he's done so. He went from 155 to 170. This year, he's at 180 with one start to go. He added a sinker late last year, which saw like a massive increase in whiff rate. So a fair bit of homework went into it. This year, he got his first All-Star appearance. I would have bought myself a mansion if he won the Cy Young Award, given how much I kept sort of topping up on him at 30s and 40s throughout the year. He's not going to win it, but he's going to go close, and he might be a great value bet next year for the Cy Young, given I think he's definitely going to finish third, behind Scooble and Crochet, who were both phenomenal. And I think the Crochet one in particular probably came out of nowhere a little bit as well. But yeah, hats off Hunter Brown, 6.2 season WAR, 2.3 ERA, a whip that's just a hair over 1 and 200 strikeouts on the season. He's been, I feel like he's been largely unsung, like baseball wide, because it's always been Framber Valdez's rotation, right? Like you think about the Astros, you think Framber Valdez. It's rare that like an SP2 kind of becomes the ace, and that's what's happened with Hunter Brown this year. But look, if anyone has been getting commission for like Hunter Brown references on podcasts or whatever, I would be well paid.
He's also like, that's an easy one to put on for a long-term play because he's such a joy to watch pitch. In a lot of ways, he's kind of an old school type of guy, even though he is, he's still considered a power pitcher. And I mean, anybody who listens to this show knows that there are a lot of names that appear quite often, Hunter Brown being one of them, Tarek Scrubble, Paul Skeens, Jesus Lizard. I mean, these are the types of guys that you like to play because you feel like their strikeout numbers are always relatively reliable. But Hunter Brown's a guy that you identified based off of his potential, essentially. I mean, over the last 2 years, coming into this season, his career WAR was 3.5 in his previous 3 seasons, his first 3 seasons with Houston. This goes to the point that we were just talking about. I mean, here's a guy who's 27, entering the prime of his career, and his career WAR is still less than 10. And you feel like he's one of the dominant pitchers in baseball, and he is one of the dominant pitchers in baseball because he's still considered in the Cy Young conversation and likely will be for the next 5 years. So it's fun to identify a guy like that you can watch every single start, and he's just a joy to watch pitch. It's not like you've put in an unders bet on the Chicago White Sox to win 55 games, and it's just the most nightmarish long-term play that you can think of. Something like that's a player performance for a guy who is so fun to watch. You cheer for the guy because you enjoy watching him. You don't really have any stake in the game. He's in another league. He's not even, it's not as though what he does is necessarily going to affect the Arizona Diamondbacks or whatever team you follow, which makes that a really fun long-term play, I would imagine.
And it goes to show, for me, games and parts of the season that might seem useless can often be setting up for important plays for next year. And I guess if you're doing this long term and year after year, that's where you sort of start to see it. So I loved the second half of the year for Hunter Brown last year. And whilst you don't really get much out of that in the sort of short term and the smaller sample size, it then lets you go with a fair bit of confidence. And I did have a fair bit on the Hunter Brown play this year because of that. First half of last year in 19 outings, he had a 4.4 ERA. So that's just like a league average starter. He adds that sinker, generates much more whiff off the back of it, and in 12 starts is a 2.26 ERA. That 2.26 ERA from the second half of last year is basically what he's done the entire year this year. So there's often signs that guys figure it out mid-year that really sort of suggest they're just going to catapult going forward into next year. So it might be something that we might want to look at over the next week or two, guys that have had good second halves that we can circle back and talk about when we're sort of leading into the season next year in February and March.
Well, it's a good lead in, I think, to your picks for this week. Is there anybody that stands out in your mind from the last 2-3 months? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but is that kind of pitcher maybe who maybe didn't perform well early in the season or was injured early in the season and has come on and had a good sort of back half to 2025 that you're starting to identify? Obviously, I mean, those are things that you do in the offseason, heading into spring training and before the 2026 season begins. We'll nail down what those best plays for you are. But is there anybody that you've just kind of penciled in to say this is somebody I want to look at for some potential player performance long-term plays for next year?
2 words: Eury Perez.
I knew this was. I knew that was coming. I knew that. That's almost like I teed you up.
Yeah, like he's just had hiccups from coming back from injury, right? He's still younger than Paul Skeens, man. He has 94 strikeouts in 19 outings this year. I got a feeling that based on Hunter Brown's price being 5 for 200, that we might be able to get like 7s for Yuri Perez next year for 200. If he stays healthy, he gets stretched out a little bit more, and they are giving him more and more. Like he had a 96 pitch outing the other day against the Nats. Like when they've got trust in him and he's fully through the injury, which he mostly is now, but he gets 32 outings next year. Like, look out, man. He could be anything. I'm still so high on that guy. A full spring training behind him. Yeah, I think the Fish could be something worth following next year as a team, given like how many young guys they kind of stumbled onto and they've been playing. Like there's just a guy everywhere doing something. Like a Jacob Marcy is just hitting like 300. You know, like the team is fun. They got some really impressive young pitching arms led by that guy, Yuri Perez. He'll be the one I'm watching for sure.
I was going to be disappointed if Yuri Perez was not the first name out of your mouth. So you didn't disappoint me. All right, well, let's stop talking about next year. There's still some important baseball to play in the next 6 days, and you no doubt have had a look at some of the plays that you potentially like over the next couple of days. What have you got for the listeners?
So this is one that look, I say this with a bit of sadness because I was big on this guy from the day he debuted, and we've played him a few times this year. Where the sadness and the regret comes from is not taking him for National League Rookie of the Year, because from the first time we talked this year, we said, someone's going to win this award that comes from the clouds. They're going to be 51s right now. You were very big on it not being Roki. It wasn't. Well, it definitely isn't Roki. All of the names that were big on that list, I mean, I think Jordan Lawler was like third favorite. He only got called up like 2 weeks ago. The NL Rookie of the Year award was so clearly going to be a value play that I'm sad I wasn't sprinkling on guys who had a really good outing the first time when they were starting pitching. The guy I'm talking about is Cade Horton, who is probably going to win the award, the young rookie for the Cubs, because he was a monstrous price earlier in the season. So that one got away, unfortunately, but hopefully he can make up for it for us tomorrow, because I'm going to be taking him at home against the Mets in a series that's huge for the Mets. It's huge for the D-backs. It's huge for the Reds. Cade Horton's been quite consistent with what he's shown this year. They don't let him go beyond sort of 85 pitches because they don't want to put heaps on a young arm, which is pretty common for teams these days. But in that 80 to 85 pitches, he's regularly getting sort of 4, 5, 6 strikeouts. I think tomorrow, player performance double, there is terrific value in Cade Horton, 5 strikeouts, and the Cubs to win at $3.60. His line is 4.5. So to get, you know, if he's getting over that 5, we talk about this all the time. If he's getting over his line, he's probably pitching above average. If he's pitching above average, the Cubs should be winning. $3.60 just screams value to me. A Mets team that is scuffling in a big way. Part of that has been the second half drop off of some of their starters. That includes Peterson, who is going on the mound tomorrow. I mean, I was looking at his numbers just before. I think he's a prime candidate of a sort of second half scuffler. First half of the season, 18 starts, 3.06 ERA. Second half of the season, 11 starts, 5.71 with a whip over 1.5. He has just not been having a good time lately. Going up against a Rookie of the Year favorite at home, I think I'm gonna take that one at 360 because that is a nice way to play. And we did have a bit of success on the weekend. The 2 plays from Friday, the Hunter Brown 7 strikeouts obviously got up, hence the flowers for the season bet, but also Garrett Crochet 8 and the win on the player performance double. He just dominated. So that was a 240-ish price as well. And sticking to that theme then and chasing the above 2s, which, you know, Eric's been driving over the last month or so and we've been having success with. This is probably going to backfire because I can never, ever bet on the Cardinals with them or for them, against them, in the same state as them. It doesn't seem to work, but I'm not going to let that stop me. I couldn't overlook Logan Webb's 6 strikeouts and the Giants to win at $2.30. It just seems like a pretty clear pitching mismatch on paper. The Cardinals won today, which was sort of unexpected, but not so much because of, you know, the Giants' offense not hitting. It was just the Cardinals sort of hit better, right? But Verlander was out after, I think, 4 or 5 today. Logan Webb should be giving you 6 or 7. And if Logan Webb's going 6 or 7, I just trust in the Giants offense to be picking up enough runs to scrape past this Cardinals team is sort of, you know better than anyone. They could rock up tomorrow and score 10, or they could score 0. And that's sort of part of the rocks and diamonds game that we play with St. Louis at times. But I feel if we're getting 6 or 7 from Logan Webb, there's going to be a lead there to be held by the bullpen. And if we're getting 6 or 7 from Logan Webb, he should be getting 6 strikeouts. So $2.30 for a play like that, a play that to me feels like it should be $1.70 or $1.80. I'm happy to take it, even though it's nothing sexy. It's just value.
Do you think differently about player performance doubles this time of year? I mean, probably not so much in the Cardinals-San Francisco game. I think that's probably a good play because the game is a coin flip. You feel like, yes, maybe the Giants are still in it. I mean, the two teams have the same record. So in that, it's maybe it's not as glaring. But in a game like Cubs-Mets, putting that kind of bet on before you see the lineups, having no idea what the Cubs are thinking, are they just throwing a lineup out for the sake of it because the game means nothing to them? And then knowing the Mets are fighting for their playoff life, you would think conventional wisdom would tell you to back the Mets in that sense. So obviously, whenever you're looking at Horton and thinking if he gets to a certain level, if he gets his 5+, 6+, whatever it may be, you feel like the Cubs have a good chance to win the game. Is it just a predictive thing more than anything else to say if he does get that, I like the position they're going to be in, and you just kind of take the momentum, this team needs to win, this team may rest stars, you just take that out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess 2 things to that. Firstly, the Mets have been playing for their playoff life for 3 weeks, and that hasn't put a rocket up the middle.
That's true. That's a good point.
Expect tomorrow for them to be, trying hard. I'm sure they've been trying as hard as they can. They're just doing a terrible job over the last few weeks. For me, 6 games left is too early for the Cubs to be resting starters. Like you can't put guys on ice for a week and expect them to then turn up in a wild card series. I would 100% be playing it very differently in heading into the final series of the week. And I think when we talk on Friday, I'm going to be more inclined to be playing some different markets outside of those, just for those reasons, and maybe honing in on some of those series like the ones we talked about. I think Cleveland against Boston, like series like that when they are effectively playoff games in all but name. I'd be very surprised if the Cubs are rolling out a B-grade lineup this far out of the season, but it's definitely a risk that you take. I do think there are often times where the pricing is already reflective of the expected lineups. Like the Cubs are $1.83 tomorrow. Vegas knows. Like if Chicago was going to be rolling out all their AAA guys tomorrow, the Cubs are $2.50 already. Like that kind of thing just doesn't go unknown to the market. So I'm confident that the Cubs are going to be rolling out 90%, if not 100% of their star players, and it'll fall on Cade Horton to do what he can do and see if we can get the jockeys.
Yeah, the Cubs, yeah, you're right. I mean, they've got 6 games to end at home, playing the Cardinals at Wrigley Field for only the second time all year, the last 3 games of the season, when it means absolutely nothing. So hooray, the balanced schedule. Anyways, it's a good thing that we were able to bring this full circle on the final.
They could play
baseball expats of the regular season. Yeah, it's good grief. Well, like I said, any opportunity to air my grievance, I will do it. This will not be the last time that you've heard me complain about the balanced schedule. Well, Spoon, thanks for. Well, look, we'll still call this the flu game. I mean, maybe MJ wasn't feeling the worst that he had felt on that particular night. Maybe he felt worse the night before and was just able to get up for the flu game. So look, based on your performance and where you were yesterday, I'm happy to call this your flu game.
Again, I don't recall MJ hitting a 5-1 futures play either. Actually, he might have. He's
actually a better than,
isn't he?
It's actually a better than fair chance. On what we've learned about MJ over the last decade, I think there's a better and fair chance that he was probably faking the whole thing so that he was able to get 5-1 on some sort of player performance double that he had in and of himself. Don't sue us, MJ. Anyways, we will be back on Friday. Eric may be with us. Who knows? Maybe we'll share some of the videos that he's been sending to us. It's 3, 4, 5 moose crossing the whatever river he's in. But if you don't hear from Eric, you will hear from Spoon and I again on Friday. So we will chat to you one more time before the regular season is up. And just a reminder, if you haven't done so yet, please like and subscribe. Tell your friends. It is the best marketing tool that we have, and it does help grow the podcast. But until we speak Friday, enjoy your week and enjoy your baseball. See you, everybody.